Brian Romance. I'm the president of Indiantown Marine Center in Indiantown, Florida. Our company, alongside many other marine companies represented by the people standing here, filed suit against the Florida East Coast Railway, the United States Coast Guard, and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. For 96 years, this drawbridge has been in the open position by law to accommodate marine traffic. However, that is soon going to change. We want to make clear that we did not go looking for this fight, but only after our numerous attempts to achieve a fair and equitable outcome were rebuffed and ignored did we finally take the step of defending our livelihoods, public safety, and the basic rights that every voter is entitled to. This is an issue of a business community standing up against a large, well-funded, well-represented private corporation, quite literally a fortress, and two very large agencies of the federal government with a lot of bureaucracy involved. This is the proverbial big corporation controlling government. The summary of our case is straightforward. The Florida East Coast Railway is the owner of the railroad drawbridge at mile 7.4 on the Okeechobee Waterway, where we are standing presently. This is the only waterway that allows navigation across the state of Florida, making it vital for commerce as well as pleasure boating. FEC Railroad, by allowing Brightline to utilize this drawbridge and its plan to extend rail service to Orlando, is condoning and contributing to an obstruction to navigation of a federally regulated waterway. That obstruction is not insignificant. Brightline has announced that it will add 32 trains a day to the rail crossing at the drawbridge. Even now, this anticipated obstruction is impacting the local economy. We expect that impact to become more severe in the coming weeks. Our suit seeks declaratory relief against FEC as the bridge owner, as well as the Coast Guard and the Army Corps of Engineers. By allowing Brightline to operate trains in this manner, Florida East Coast Railroad is violating a federal law that prohibits any entity from obstructing the free navigation of the waterways of the United States. We seek injunctive relief to prevent FEC from allowing Brightline, a privately owned company, to implement their declared plan to run the full schedule of trains over the bridge starting this summer. We also seek declaratory judgment that the U.S. Coast Guard and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers have a duty to prevent this obstruction from occurring, as federal law charges these two agencies with ensuring the navigable waters of the United States remain unobstructed. There are rulemaking procedures that must be followed before changes to bridge regulation can occur. For Brightline to be profitable, the bridge will now be forced to be primarily in the closed position. This change will seriously obstruct the efficient movement of commercial and recreational marine traffic, and we believe it will negatively impact a multitude of marine-related service businesses, reduce property values, and result in an overall unsafe boating condition at the bridge. Our suit seeks to compel the Coast Guard and the Corps of Engineers to act as required by federal law to provide relief from the harm of the waterway obstruction. But this is only a temporary solution. The solution is to build a light rail bridge that will allow passenger trains and marine traffic to pass unobstructed. Tri-Rail operates several passenger trains a day on the CSX track that clear the minimum vertical height for marine traffic to pass without a drawbridge. And I remind you, Brightline is not public transportation. This is a private railroad. Most of the plaintiffs that are standing with me here today have already experienced damage to their businesses. Treasure Coast has a long history of enjoying our waterways. It is ingrained in our culture as well as vital to our economy. Our suit seeks to protect the health, the life, and safety of boaters, homeowners, and marine business owners and their employees and families. The impact of the waterway obstruction will be widely felt throughout our community. And we invite any group or individual that may be impacted by this issue to join our cause. We have already identified additional plaintiffs. We are very pleased to have the support of our Congressman, Brian Mast, as well as Senator Marco Rubio, among other elected federal, state, and local officials. We also seek support of the public. This is the proverbial David versus Goliath story happening right in front of our eyes. The amount of marine traffic using this waterway will only increase. And for our community to freely enjoy its right to navigate our waters unobstructed, safely, and pursue their livelihoods, David must emerge victorious in this battle. We hope that the community will exercise their rights held within our republic to reach out to their public officials and demand that they defend their rights and support this vital cause. I'd like to invite Brian Mast to come up and make remarks as well.
There's a lot to talk about with this bridge, and I think there's two different conversations going on right now. One, there's the closure of this waterway for roughly a 20-day window to all marine traffic. So let's start with that. Number one, the impact to the community is not something that the United States Coast Guard really sought comment on. They didn't even alert the city of Port St. Lucie, who if you're going off any of their boat launches, comes through the North Fork of the river here in order to get out here to the Atlantic. They didn't alert that city that this was even taking place. They didn't alert a number of law enforcement entities that their marine units wouldn't be able to get through. They didn't tell people that are out there moving barges and building docks for other people that they'd have to bring their construction to a halt because they wouldn't be able to come through. Or they wouldn't be able to get from one side to another in order to fuel up. Or the neighborhoods that have docks and clubs and people that want to go out fishing, or commercial fishermen, that they wouldn't be able to get through that for that 20-day window. That's one problem, and the reason that's such a major problem is because it is a winners and losers issue. And the Coast Guard chose to go out there and make Brightline and FEC a winner by allowing them to close off this waterway in its entirety without saying, listen, maybe it costs you a little bit more to take all the pieces and work on those pieces off-site in other places, but we're going to allow you to do it all in place because it's more convenient to your business, even though it's to the detriment of every other business, every other community, every other resident in this whole area. It's to their detriment, but we're going to pick them as the winner and let them just close off the water. That's one major issue. What was mentioned here just now in comment was what's going on with the schedule of this drawbridge and what we see as forthcoming or as imminent by the U.S. Coast Guard. So it's not just that there's 32 trains coming by here a day, what they would call high-speed trains. It's also on top of those 32 high-speed trains, the 15 to 18 freight trains a day that go on top of this. And on top of that, there are maintenance routes every day, people driving an F-150 over the tracks, something like that, where they still have to put the bridge down for that as well. So you're talking about upwards of 50 train routes through this, largely in the 15-hour window of 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. And if you understand that this bridge takes no less than 18 minutes to go from the open position where marine travel can go to the closed position and back open, no less than 18 minutes. You're talking about that bridge being closed somewhere between 13, 14 hours out of a 15-hour window. And that's just a middle finger to this entire community. I want to give a few other quick points outlining how this has taken place. So we spoke to the Coast Guard about them closing off the waterway for 20 days. They chose not to do any economic impact assessments to all the communities around here. They ignored that. They didn't care what the economic impact was going to be on everybody, and that was their position. They weren't going to look at it. As it relates to the upcoming schedule for when they will be able to close the bridge and when they will have to keep it open. You had an environmental impact statement that had to occur in order to get any of this permitted, the new train routes. In that environmental impact statement, the Brightline and the FEC agreed that there would be a train schedule that everybody could count on. Since then, they have been fighting to say, no, we don't want any train schedule at all. We just want to be able to close it whenever we're coming through, and then it's open whenever we allow it to be open. So they're turning their back on that environmental impact statement. You go beyond that and you say, when you look at this waterway, and originally in 2017 we did a study with the U.S. Coast Guard. Probably all of these folks participated in it along with other people in the community, known as a waterway access management study. Very significant study to the amount of boat traffic coming through here and how it's affected. The Coast Guard said they don't like what that came up with, which was basically that the community should get 50% of the time access and the train should get 50% of the time access. Coast Guard didn't like that because the train said they can't operate with 50% of the time. They're asking for more like 45 minutes out of every hour and sometimes even more than that. So the Coast Guard said, we're going to throw that study in the trash, and decided they're going to do another study. That's what they said they were going to do, was another study. Since then, they've changed their mind and they said they're not going to do another study. They're just going to take the information from Brightline and FEC about what they see in terms of maritime traffic and not do their own study. That's another middle finger to the community and every mariner in and around this area, that they're not going to take the time to do that. Some of the other things that you can look at, last summer there was hundreds of mariners that came out here when Miami Sector Coast Guard Admiral was coming out to take a look at the waterway. Before that was taking place, that Admiral of the U.S. Coast Guard said to individual mariners and said to my office and myself personally that if people come out there on their boats when he's out there, that they are going to be fined. They are going to be essentially what we call pulled over by law enforcement over there. They're not going to be allowed to exercise their First Amendment right to petitioning the government based upon grievances that they have about what's going on with this. That was the United States Coast Guard tasked with supporting and defending the Constitution of the United States, like any other entity in our military, willfully taking away the First Amendment rights of people in our community. That's another major problem associated with this. The list goes on and on of where the Coast Guard has been acquiescing to Brightline and FEC, not worrying at all about what they're doing to destroy this community. And this suit has so many legs beyond what we can even speak about. I hope that whatever judge is taking a look at this chooses to ask me about what I've witnessed both in front of the public with the Coast Guard and behind closed doors with the United States Coast Guard. Conversations that I've had with them, of them changing their mind, saying idiotic things. One of the biggest things, I'll make this my last point because there's so much that could be said. One of the biggest things that brought hundreds of mariners out here last summer was when I told them what the United States Coast Guard said about our waterway and the three bridges that are right next to us. The Roosevelt Bridge overhead, the Florida East Coast Drawbridge, and the Dixie Highway Drawbridge. All within a couple hundred feet of each other in a waterway that has significant currents. The United States Coast Guard in Washington, D.C., individuals that probably have never laid eyes on our waterway, came into my office and said, well, we assessed that if we gave you a 15-minute window of time of that waterway being open, that you could get about 75 boats through in a 15-minute window of time. And every single person that I said that to in our community immediately responded with swear words because they knew exactly how ridiculous a statement like that was. But that's the kind of naive thinking that they're using to write schedules for this waterway or to close off this waterway in its entirety. That can't stand. Again, just absolute abomination. Middle finger to the community, a community that has zero benefit whatsoever by the Brightline coming through here, because the closest they pick up people to the south is probably 30, 35 miles to the south, and the next place that they're dropping them off is probably 50 miles to the north. So they're literally just a pass-through community. We're just a pass-through community to them. That's an inconvenience to them, and that's how they're treating the community. So in that, I'm happy to answer questions when everybody's done, but that's a short list of the very gross problems that have taken place.
Ryan, thank you so much, sir. If anybody has any questions, be happy to field them.
I'd like to ask questions to the congressman if I could.
You certainly can.
Dan called this a David versus Goliath. Well, he's got you on his side. So what can you as a congressman do to help them?
Done extensive work already, but I can't sit here and pretend you that it hasn't resulted in the Coast Guard ignoring us. Again, not doing, we asked them to do an economic analysis of all the businesses that would be affected by them closing off the waterway for 20 days. They just said, no, we're not going to do it. That's just what they said. Senator Marco Rubio, right? Also, state of Florida, we submitted a letter to the U.S. Coast Guard saying, what you do has to be fair. It's got to be a minimum of basically 50-50. Let's say 30 minutes for the waterway to be open every hour, 30 minutes for the train. Most people in the community would consider that pretty fair. You know, a relationship that everybody could deal with. Brightline doesn't want that. They're not looking for fair. And really the only thing that they're looking for from the community is taxpayer funds in order to build a new bridge, and they talk about doing that. And it's something that they do plan on doing, but nobody should be confused that building a new bridge that's more than 6 feet above the water line where more boats can get through here would probably not take place for a minimum of 10 years from now. There's no engineering done. There's no permits pulled from the Corps of Engineers or anybody else. Anybody that's worked in government or even building a dock know how long that takes. And so you're talking about a long ways in the future. Whatever schedule they put in place in the next couple of months will be in all likelihood a schedule that everybody in here is stuck with for the next 10 years. And that, in a very big way, affects every single one of these businesses and just everybody in the community that moved here because of the way of life that they're looking to shut down. So again, you know, what can we do with that? We're going to keep fighting the U.S. Coast Guard. We're going to keep making the community aware of what the Coast Guard is doing, saying, where they are being overly naive, and ask the community for their assistance, because I can't pretend to you they're not giving me a middle finger also. We need people to write to the Coast Guard, call the Coast Guard, send emails to the Coast Guard saying, these things have to take place. You cannot close off this waterway. And, you know, truth be told, when it comes down to it, if they decide to close off our waterway, then we'll start protesting with a sailboat under the bridge or something else. But one way or another, it's not going to be allowed to happen.
Congressman, last year, it was just last summer that you led sort of a flotilla with the Coast Guard. We went through this area based on what these gentlemen were talking about how many boats can get through in a certain amount of time. You had the Coast Guard, and you must be, I know you say it's a middle finger, you've got to be incredibly frustrated. You had the Coast Guard on the boat with you, documenting with them what you were doing.
I'll give you brought up, we had the Coast Guard down here, and that was led by the mariners in our community. All I did is alert them to what the Coast Guard said. And when I told them the Coast Guard thinks they can put 75 boats through this waterway in 15 minutes, they said, hey, we got to step up and we got to show them that they're responsible for marine safety, and there's nothing about that is safe whatsoever. When you start talking about the beam across each boat, one of them going past another one, moving a barge through there, moving a sailboat through there. What happens if they close the Dixie Bridge when they're telling other people that they can go through the train bridge when that's open? There's so many variables that can take place that affect safety that these guys could speak to at a significantly higher level. And what the Coast Guard said to us at that time was, again, if the mariners come out and show what's not possible, they're going to cite them and fine them. And then, I don't know if this even made it out, but what the Coast Guard said to me was that even though they witnessed with their own eyes everything that was taking place, well, listen, this was not an official study, so we're not going to be able to take into consideration what we saw with our own eyes. That's what the Coast Guard said about what everybody showed them. Even though we saw it with our own eyes, we're not allowed to take that into consideration. That is the highest level of ignorance that could affect anybody. We will willfully ignore what we saw with our own eyes because it doesn't fit the narrative of the Goliath of a business that they're looking to support over the community.
And Congressman, they don't seem to care at all. This is the single choke point in the entire system, a single track bridge. I know they're dealing a lot with issues at the New River Bridge, but there's a double track there. I mean, this is a huge impact for our businesses at our west and homes.
Yeah, the Coast Guard, Brightline, FEC, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, they all have a role to play in what's taking place here. And to say that they don't even care, the fact that they even allowed some of this permitting to go forward, and this also goes to what's known as the FRA, the Federal Railroad Administration, also the National Transportation Safety Board, those are related to rail industry as well. They're going to allow them to move the 32 high-speed trains, the 15 to 18 freight trains, and the maintenance routes that go up here on a daily basis. They authorized that to take place without really even considering how much it's going to close down the waterway. The Coast Guard signed off years ago saying, yes, this would essentially be allowed to take place without bothering to do the math of how long that waterway would be closed. Again, that's just a gross level of incompetence and ignorance that took place, and it's to the detriment of everybody in the community. That can't be the way that it happens. These guys can say it 100 other ways.
Is that it?
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, awesome.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Magnificent.
So folks, you heard it all. We've been here, as you know, I started Florida Not All Aboard 9 years ago, almost a decade ago. We have Congressman Mast here fighting, and we've also had, before that, Congressman Murphy. And honestly, the Coast Guard has been like that all along. They just disregard our arguments and what it's doing to our businesses west of the bridge here. This is a lawsuit that's been filed. There's 13 entities so far that are marine related. We have Simply Yachts, we have Indian Town Marine Center, they are spearheading it, Marine Max, AC Meridian Marina. I mean, all these businesses are severely impacted. They have, in the complaint, they're stating they've got customers that are leaving because they want to go out and use their boats. They want to go to the sandbar, of course. And with this bridge being down as much as it is, they are going to be severely impacted. Folks that are living west of the bridge are concerned about their real estate values as well. And there were studies that were done that said it would impact those homes. This was done when Laurel Kelly was the property appraiser. So this is a long-term fight. It's coming to fruition now. Brightline stating that they're going to be coming down these tracks probably starting next month, and they are going to have 2 trains every hour, north and south, plus the freight. So this is a really big issue. It's a severe impact to the businesses, again, west of the bridge and all the homeowners. So right now we need all your voices, everybody. Let's join Congressman Mast, Senator Rubio. They're both supporting this lawsuit. We're going to follow it carefully. In the meantime, folks, I'm going to cover this Wednesday the Martin County Brightline settlement. And I'm going to leave you with this quote from the Board of County Commissioners. They said, what has the $4 million gotten you as taxpayers in the last 4 years? This is back in 2018. It got us a very strong seat at the table for very strong negotiations. For the marine industry, I never heard of a realistic resolution to how to keep the trestle up enough for folks to come out of the western side. If we're able to have a 15-minute window of opportunity, that is the same 15 minutes each hour from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. That does not address quite a bit of the issues, not all of them, but at least it's a reasonable option for folks that have taller boats on the Palm City side. Your Martin County Commission agreed to the 15 minutes an hour, and folks, you know how devastating this is. I'm going to go over that Brightline settlement agreement, and we're going to go over what's in it and what the County Commission agreed to, and we have good folks here that are really fighting the fight to try and make sure our bridge is open so that we all can use it. Everybody west of the waterway are not going to be cut off from what was our ocean access. So tune in Wednesday morning, 10:05 a.m., WSTU AM 1450. And of course, I'll be right here on Facebook Live as well. I'll be looking for your comments, and we'll go over that Brightline settlement. Take care. I'll see you.